Right, yes, sir. Another beautiful morning. It's here and time to present a fresh edition of the Citizens Forum on Daybreak Show, Rock City 101.9 FM here in ABEOCCIMA. Of course, this is the voice of the people. Dele Ayodo is my name. You're welcome.
And I am Chienye. Good morning and welcome on board.
Alright, yes, sir. Issues of money, wages, salaries. That's what we'll be looking at this morning, really. Specifically, we'll be looking at the long-term call for an increase in what is called the national minimum wage in this country. And only recently, the federal government, at last, Labour will want to say, inaugurated that committee that will meet, and then discuss, agreed on what exactly should be the figure or the procedure to increase the national minimum wage in the country. Over the weekend, Labour warned workers and Nigerians not to expect any good move from that meeting, and of course, in their own words, workers should brace up for a long struggle with the federal government, as they do not expect that committee to satisfy the calls of Labour. And we will also remind you that while inaugurating that committee, Mr. President himself, yes, he was the one who inaugurated it, charged them, is an advice for the committee to be mindful of the capabilities of the different states to be able to pay that money. And of course, he also reminded Nigerian workers to also be ready to be flexible, considering the current economic situation, not just in the country, globally, as it will affect the figure they are calling for. This is what we want to look at this morning: the feasibility of that committee reaching an agreement, its impact on the workforce in Nigeria, and of course the role, the expectation of the state governments. Nigerians will say that is the biggest employer of labor in the country. You will also be reminded that the private sector are also expected to be a part of this proceeding. Of course, they have a representative in that committee, and whatever is agreed upon, the so-called minimum wage, has to be paid by the private sector. Quickly, we are expecting two guests to join us, one from Labour, another one from the private sector. But meanwhile, we have online from Lagos the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI, one of the very active private sector business group in Nigeria. Mr. Muda Yusuf, you are welcome to the Daybreak Show.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right. Mr. Yusuf, the discussion is on. From your experience, how do you think this committee should handle this issue?
Thank you very much. First of all, I think we need to situate the discussions and deliberations within the context of the reality on the ground. Just as you said in your background report, the President himself has advised Labour that they should also take cognizance of the capacity to pay. Capacity varies from level to level, and it varies from sector to sector. Already in the private sector, many organizations are paying far above the 18,000 minimum wage. So for many private sector organizations, particularly the medium to large ones, this
has always been that it's not true that there is any state government in Nigeria who cannot pay whatever figure is agreed upon. Do you agree with Labour on this?
No, I don't agree. First of all, many of the state and local governments are carrying a workforce that they don't need. Many of them can function effectively, optimally, with 50% of the workforce that they have now. But for political reasons, they are carrying on the workforce that are not sustainable. Quite a number of the workforce they carry now is the workforce that they have been carrying when oil price was at $100 per barrel, $120 per barrel. That is the workforce that many of them are still carrying today. So it's not sustainable. That is why you have so many of them owing salary arrears running to several months. So I think we need to be realistic. And in any case, if you have a state government, it doesn't also make sense to use almost 80% of whatever revenue you get to be paying salary. You need to develop infrastructure, you need to build roads, you need to build schools, you need to provide drugs in hospitals, you need to do a whole lot of things for the whole population. So I think what we have been avoiding is avoiding to face the reality, both on the side of government as an employer and on the side of labor. You just have to face the reality. You have to make a choice. But there's no way a state government that's not able to pay 18,000 will not be able to pay 50,000 or 90,000 as the case may be. It's very not realistic.
Okay. Now, it's good you mentioned the figure between 56,000 naira and 90,000. That's the figure Labour is proposing, depending on the Labour group you are talking with. Now, from the private sector angle, which figure do you think is realistic? You've agreed that the current 18,000 is no longer a living wage. So, which figure do you think will be realistic?
No, it's difficult to quote a figure. Because even in the private sector, capacity also varies. There are some small businesses that are just managing to survive. Even the owner of some of those businesses are not making any money. So some of them are struggling to pay maybe 20,000, some of them 30,000, some of them even as low as 15,000, depending on capacity. And we have the high-end companies that are paying over 100,000. The lowest staff earning the lowest salary in some of these big companies could be as high as 100,000. So it depends on the size of the company, it depends on the profitability of the company, it depends on the sustainability of the company. So in the private sector, it varies. You have some small businesses, micro enterprises and all of that. Some of them, even the employers have not made money in the last 2-3 years. So where do you expect the person to pay the minimum wage? You know? Some of them are also on salary because the economy has been in a bad shape for a long time. And most of the victims of the bad shape or the downturn in the economy are the small businesses.
In other words, Mr. Muda Yusuf, in other words, can we say your own position is that each employer should be left alone in the decision as to how much to pay?
Well, invariably, that is what it will come to. But as a nation, it is sensible, it is proper to have a policy on minimum wage. So that you don't have a situation where employers that have the capacity to pay, you begin to exploit their workers. Because the policy itself is to protect the workers. And if you leave the space without any form of regulation, because of the high unemployment rate, it is very easy to exploit people. Because people are desperate for jobs. So the policy should still be in place, but at least there has to be some room for
Thank you very much, Mr. Muda Yusuf, the Director General LCCI, for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a wonderful day. All right, we'll continue with the program in a couple of minutes. Let's take this short break. We'll come back, introduce one of our guests we've seen, and then move on. All right, I must thank you for still being there. Daybreak Show, Rock City 101.9 FM, Citizens Forum. This morning we are looking at the workings or the likely effect on the economy, on workers, and of course in the markets. The ongoing discussion about the national minimum wage. The committee has been inaugurated by Mr. President himself to agree on a policy for a national minimum wage. Earlier on, you heard the voice of Muda Yusuf. Muda Yusuf is the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, one of the foremost active organized private sector employers in the country. Of course, he's not against a minimum wage. He actually prefers to have for government to have a national policy on that. But for the ability of any of the employers to be forced to pay any figure is what he is against. He also charged the committee to be mindful of that it is not likely that everybody will be able to pay that figure. Right now, we have a figure between 56,000 to 90,000. The current minimum wage is, I think, 18,200 naira in the country. Okay, we have some guests in the house. We introduce them, but that's after Chienye's own submission.
Also urge them to immediately consider the issue of this minimum wage and all the matters that are ancillary to it with thoroughness and concern, not only for the welfare of our workforce, but also for the effect on the country's economy. And then we should also aim to go above the basic social protection floor for all Nigerian workers, and that should be based on the ability of each tier of government to pay. And then also the minimum wage, which is the minimum amount of compensation an employee must receive for putting in his or her labor, and as such, that should be anchored on social justice and equity. And then lastly, we cap it up by saying that the conditions of genuine social dialogue should prevail in the spirit of tripartism and collective bargaining agreements, and we enjoin all to collectively bargain in good faith and have mutual recognition for each and other, and always in a spirit of give and take. And also on the 30-member committee, we have groups like from the private sector as well as the federal and state governments, and then that of the public sector, which is made up of the Nigerian Employees, the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, NECA. We also have Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. We have the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, Mines and Agriculture, ABEOCCIMA, and Nigerian Association of Small and Medium Enterprises,
SMEDA.
We have in the studios from the organized labor group and then the private sector. From the organized labor group, we have Comrade Olusegun Adebiyi. He is the State Secretary Association of Senior Civil Servants of Nigeria. You're welcome. And we also have Jare Oyeshola from the private sector. He is the Vice President of ABEOCCIMA. You're welcome.
Good morning.
All right, morning to the gentlemen.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll start from Comrade Adebiyi.
Well, the national minimum wage, we would say by provision of law, it's the basic compensation a worker could earn in a given economy. Taking Nigeria as an instance, we all understand that labor as a material in the Constitution, 1999 Constitution precisely, is enlisted in the exclusive list. And it means that it is the function and responsibility of the central government to come up with policies, to come up with programs that will give direction to what entails or what the labor would entail in the country, which the national minimum wage is listed as well. So when we talk about the national minimum wage, we are talking about that basic pay a worker should earn, having put in his or her ability or contribution to the workings of the economy.
Now,
Would you rather accept it as a minimum wage or living wage now? Which one?
Minimum wage, living wage. Realistically, in Nigeria, it is unfortunate that we only speak about minimum wage without actually addressing ourselves to what is living wage. When we speak of living wage, we are talking about adequate compensation a worker should earn. In your preamble, when you were talking about the background of what was said by President Muhammadu Buhari, he actually mentioned about the social justice and equity, which is key to talking about living wage earnable by any Nigerian worker. But it is unfortunate that when we sit to discuss about living wage, we would rather parry to what is favorable to the ruling class, which is the minimum wage and not living wage, as you
no,
rightly asked.
we'll come to whether it's a living wage or so. We'll extensively discuss that as well. But I want us to look at all this, the charges, the meeting, the policy as it will affect us here, because this Ogun State government and people of Ogun State are also an integral part of what we are looking at. Let me start from you, Mr. Oyeshola. The first advice given by Mr. President to that committee is that they should consider, one, the welfare of the workers and the effect of whatever is agreed on the economy. You are a member of the Chamber of Commerce, private sector. How will this affect?
I will say that
You.
the organized private sector is in favor of a living wage. And I will say the organized private sector have been paying living wages because it's a competitive market. If you look at what a laborer earns now, it's more than the minimum wage the NLC is fighting for. If you want to have a bricklayer, you have to pay 3,000, 3,500 per day. And that comes to 70 and more. So we in the private sector, if you want somebody to be packing pure water for you in your factory, you pay him a wage that is happy with, because we are stakeholders in a business. So we consider the stakeholders in a business, and everybody must be happy for it to go. But I must say that in the private sector, we also look at productivity. So the productivity goes with the wage. And like I used to tell my workers, we are not expecting any money from Abuja. It's what we make that we divide. And when there is open books, the accountant is also a worker, everybody is there, we can say, okay, those who leave their capital should have this amount, workers, you have this and that. And everybody will be happy when there is...
You still need to further explain this, please, Mr. Oyeshola. How will that, at the end of the day, let's assume what we have now is 18,000 plus. Let's assume, and I don't know that, because 56 to 90, so let's assume that we have 40,000 as a national minimum wage. What effect would this have on the economy, the job you do, and of course the welfare of your own workers, which the two must take care of?
Yes, the two, I think, particularly in this economy, government must, fund it, kickstart it, because we have gone into the doldrum. The industries were not producing. We have just started production. We are now producing. The workers are not able to buy. So we need that something like what they call Bemuaremuden that will kickstart the economy. So this is something that we need, and I think it should be big, because workers have been, depreciated. If we look at the dollar value of their salary compared to what the dollar is.
I'll come back to you with that Bemuaremo, because I know clearly, even from the private sector, that their own report assessment of that memorandum was that it brought inflation into the economy, whether we were what I call it. Comrade Adebiyi, living wage is easier for anybody to mention the word living wage, and of course, very difficult to agree at a point in which we all say this is a living wage, because living means we have different living standard and style. So, what is a living wage to you, even on the same level, may not be a living wage. For instance, let's say you just have two, by your own decision, you have two children, and that's all you prefer to have, and somebody had six. Obviously, what's a living wage? I know that in 1980, as a worker, I was a level 3 officer. What do they call it? This school sat waiting for assistant, something. And the salary then was 147 naira. And with that 147 naira, I was still assisting my parents to pay school fees of my siblings. I was still able on my own to rent a house, and was still able on my own to make some savings at that month. 147 naira. Is that not a living wage? Therefore, the question is, should a living wage be the figure paid, or the living wage should be the standard of living?
Wow, what a question. First, let's examine it this way. If I may put another question to you, sir. In 1980s, you mentioned, I was probably a baby anyway, but I must ask you this question, sir. What was the value, what was the rate of exchange of dollars to naira then? Then we now can position it appropriately to know what sort of value the naira could command.
I know it, but whatever the value is, then the point I'm making is that figure is the figure 100% was still able, naira. Was still able to survive me for the month and with some savings.
Mr. Dele, speaking about the living wage, 147 naira in the 80s, 90-something thousand naira, 2017. The point here is that as long as the Nigerian economy remains a consumption nation, as long as we import rather than exporting, as long as our economy remains a mono economy, relying solely on oil, then we cannot say that we have the control about our currency. That is one. Then number two is that as at 1980s you mentioned, which you were earning 147 naira, and you were able to assist your siblings, you were paying your rent, you were feeding yourself and all sorts. We need again to revisit how much was naira to a dollar, or how much was a dollar to a naira. So it's just about, it's a relative thing. If we compare the naira value to dollar in the 80s to what is obtainable in 2017 of Nigeria today, you would realize that it seems that, like my co-discussant said, it seems that Nigeria still remain and has been in doldrums over the years. That somebody earning 147 naira could do all sorts of things that you mentioned, and somebody earning 147,000 naira today is unable to do that. We speak here about the realities of our economy. What is it that we are doing, and we're doing it wrongly? What is it that...
The follow-up question is this. To some people, what I've just said, the value of it in naira, a stronger economy should have been the focus, should have been the preference, should have been more important than continually arguing for an increased figure of salary.
I still maintain that we cannot divorce the reality about the productivity of a nation from what is obtainable about the value of what currency of such a nation could command. A very good example is this, sir. In the 80s you mentioned, though like I said, I was a baby, but I read it that you had industries along Oshodi, along Apapa, you had industries scattered around Lagos and some other major cities in the country. Take for instance, Kano was known as headquarters of textile mills then in the country. Then you talk about productivity. You know, the gross domestic productivity of the country then was huge. What we were exporting was huge. the comatose we are experiencing today in the power sector wasn't there, or relatively it was not as bad as this. So we talk about these dynamics of the economy that will help to drive the value of currency of that country in the international market. So when we now come back to 2017, you would realize that however much you are earning in the value of naira, what is the ratio? What is the exchange rate of that much of the volume of the naira you are earning today compared to that dollar? And we ask ourselves, are those industries still existing today? You go to Oshodi, you go to Apapa, most of those industries have been converted to religious centers. People are no longer employed. Those who are employable are not getting employment. Those who are working are not getting the value for what they are doing. So if you were able to assist your siblings to maintain yourself in the 80s with as low as 147 naira, it is not of the figure. It is not about the figure you are earning then compared to how much of figure I am earning today. It is about the value. It's about the productivity of the nation. What your currency could command at international market.
All right, Mr. Oyeshola, the same question I want to react on, because from the private sector, you probably feels what you are saying more than him or any other person. The strong dollar against naira, the absence of vital infrastructures, electricity, and other things for your work. So react to what he has just said about whether it is the figure we earn that should be more important that what we should pursue, or better infrastructural provision.
Of course, minimum wage in the private sector is not decreed by government. I happen to be in the IT industry, and the minimum wage is on productivity. It's not even on qualification. It's not dependent on whether you have school cert or you have BSc
or degree. PhD.
It's what you can produce.
Right.
So people an IT student can earn 200,000 in some IT industries because of the productivity. So with this, we see that the productivity is the key, like you said. But all this, for a government, if we want to fight corruption, we must see to this minimum wage, because that's what happened in the industry. If you don't pay your workers well, they become corrupt like they are in government, and you lose money. If they are there well paid, they have confidence in the company they are working for, the productivity of the company improves, all of you gains. And that's the way I happen to see it.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's be honest here. Let's be factual here. So many governors find it very difficult to pay 10,000 naira.
Yeah.
I find it very difficult to pay salaries. I find it even difficult to pay 15,000 naira. And now you people are proposing about 56,000 naira. How feasible is this? We should also consider the effect it will have on the economy. I hope you know that. It will affect so many things in the country. Inflation will set in, even the exchange rate will be affected. So, how feasible would this be?
Chienye, I observed you had become partially spokesperson for the government. Anyway, let's talk about the feasibility of them being able to pay. I would speak in the direction of prioritization. Across the country, we see it, we read it, we feel it, where those in authority misprioritize, if I may use that expression. They misprioritize. And when you misprioritize or so, you bring in ideas that are strange to the society. And in other words, the systems and the subsystems that should be working in tandem to produce homogeneity and balance of systems will go wrong. That's exactly what we are experiencing in the country. You cannot tell me where the government of each state is how would I put it? They overinflate the figures of their workers. No single state government would want to tell you precisely the number of their workers. Why are they hiding it? And they would come out. I do wonder sometimes they will come out to tell the public out there that this is the rate they pay, the wage bill they pay per month. And curiously, the figure keeps constant. The figure is not climbing up, neither is it going down. They will tell you, I paid this so and so much every month. Doesn't mean people are not retiring on monthly basis, even on daily basis. Doesn't mean that we are not losing people either by death or by incapacitation or what have you. Doesn't mean that people are not by their volition leave their jobs for green pastures or greener pastures outside of the country. Let's be realistic here. Where you put those things that are not necessary before those things that are necessary, there we begin to experience this economic doldrum that we are seeing.
Do you think the government has this budget to handle this?
They do have. Yes, they do have. In most of the projects that are executed in the country, you discover that most of those figures are overinflated. They are overinflated. Take for instance, I recall when President Muhammad Buhari came in 2015, they had to review the figure put at this second runway, or is it the first runway in the only runway we have in Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport in Abuja. The previous government had a figure, but when the current government came in, they reviewed the figure and they were giving us the benchmark of which that kind of a project could be done in sub-Saharan countries of the world. We have countries like Kenya, we have countries like Tanzania, like Tunisia, who had done the similar projects in a much more reduced rate, valued at dollar rates. But in Nigeria, figures are easily and usually inflated. That's the reality, unless we don't want to face it. Now, when you put your prioritization, or when you put your priorities into so-called infrastructures, you want to build this, you want to construct that at the expense of the workers, at the expense of the geese that lays the golden egg, then you will be telling the public out there that you are unable to pay. What can we do to bring about the correlation? How can we bring about the balance and all that? They can pay. It is visible.
Comrade Adebiyi, we have to take this break. There's need for us to go for the national news at 10 o'clock. After that, yes, we still have the two gentlemen in the House, Comrade Olusegun Adebiyi of the DNC Joint Negotiating Council, and of course Mr. Jare Oyeshola from the ABEOCCIMA Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We are looking at the effect on the local economy and workers and eventual increase in the minimum wage. Yes, the discussion is on in Abuja right now. Stay tuned. All right, thank you so much for still keeping faith with us. Rock City 101.9 FM in the city of Abeokuta. Yes, Citizens Forum, looking at that likely local effect on the economy, on the workers' welfare, and eventual increase in our minimum wage. Yes, the committee is on, has been inaugurated really, that will determine what the next figure will be for the minimum wage. We have two gentlemen here with us. First, Olusegun Adebiyi is from the JNC, Joint Negotiating Council, and we also have Mr. Jare Oyeshola, who is the Vice President at ABEOCCIMA, that's the Abeokuta Chamber of Commerce, Mines Industry, and Agriculture. Of course, they've been stating their position, they've been drilling me and as to their position. Comrade Adebiyi, just one question, 1 minute, and we open the telephone lines for these people. Now, for the states, because part of what may likely come up is after a policy on minimum wage, the states may be asked to fix their own figure. What people have said, Ogun, proximity to Lagos, Lagos is standing on its own, has been able to pay any figure, whatever. What should be the standard in Ogun?
Really, I shouldn't be preempting what the committee will be doing or they will be coming up with. But if we must say the fact, we can compare notes with what is obtainable in Ogun State with that of Lagos State. Reality on ground living in Lagos, all Nigerians are aware about that. You live in Lagos, you're on the high side because of the cost of living. You pay for your transportation, you pay for your accommodation, you're responsible for your health, you are responsible for the upkeep of the kids, and by the way, you probably contribute to the community development association where such money goes into security, into providing of paving, what do you call it, community roads and access streets. Um, and of course, you would agree with me that the cost of living in Lagos is as high and comparatively even in that of Ogun State areas like Ogijo. If you live in Ogijo, you live in Agbado, Okiodo, Agbara, which is
They
more or
call it
less
New Lagos.
New Lagos now. Invariably, the much of money you are going to spend living in the heart of Lagos would almost be the much of money you'll be spending to stay alive in those parts of Ogun State. So putting a figure to it might not be that easy, but I want to say that you probably be earning or should be earning something well above 150,000 naira a month. There
Okay.
you can say you should.
All right, Mr. Oyeshola, you wear the shoe, so you know where it pitches.
Like I said, minimum wage should be related to cost of living. And in my own opinion, um, the minimum that we have workers in our offices eating break, at least they spend 200-300, and so you think if you're talking a family of two, you're talking of nearly over 1,000 naira a day, and therefore anything less could not cover cost of feeding. Then we still have cost of transportation. We have cost of electricity, and we have cost of getting water. You know, gradually, people are no longer drinking tap water. You're having all this poor water or pure water in
Do they have the pure with the tap water? How many areas?
That's what I say must be factored in, the cost of water. So you see people taking bags of pure water in, even to do, manual things at home, even to wash hands at parties. So when we factor all those in, I think the minimum wage should definitely be more than twice what it is now. And we are expecting that when people hand that, they will be able to pay
So
their
the
rents.
private sector will be satisfied with that. Twice without, let's just say 36,000 or 40,000.
I say what I could, see as somebody living in ABEOCCIMA, at least for people to be able to eat, transport themselves and something, I see minimum wage not being less than that.
All right. Okay, yes, time to let you be a part of this. Let's get what you think about what we are talking about, either from Muda Yusuf, whom we spoke with earlier on, or from our two guests, Shegun Adebiyi and Mr. Jare Oyeshola. Yes, we open all the lines of communication. Come back to our guests to react. The ones who want to react to from those messages and calls. Mr. Adebiyi.
Yes, sir. Big Daddy, Dr. Nkom, Alaron, the three actually, I would say, charged the labor movement to do more, and that to them we have not been doing enough, especially engaging with the government on improving infrastructures and enabling those factors that will ginger the economy to the benefit of all. But I want to call their attention as well to the fact that labor has always been the forum where we engage with the Nigerian government. That's a fact. You must agree with me that in as much as labor is not the government itself, labor as a movement, the organized labor remain the only surviving opposition group in the country today. Where you have some other groups that ought to engage with the government not doing their role, or not performing their role, Labour has always been in the forefront, charging the Nigerian government, calling their attention to one deficiency or the other. Take, for instance, the Pengasand and the Nupeng unions, who happen to be in the oil and gas sector. Nigerians would agree with those two unions that they have always been championing the cause of Nigerians as well. Because we must realize that Nigerians themselves are members of these two unions that I mentioned. And whatever goes down in the subsector where they find themselves will equally affect them too. So talking about rejigging the economy, putting our refineries in order, trying to control the price of crude, trying to control the local price of petroleum at our filling stations. Nupeng and Pengasand have always continued to engage with the government. So how could you now submit that the labor movement have not been doing enough to engaging with the government?
All right. Mr. Oyeshola, you have any issue you want to respond to?
Yes, on the dollar issue, I think it's something that is also a part of what could determine the minimum wage. But in the private sector, of course, we work with whatever government directs, and we put our margin on it, and we put the wages of our workers on it, and we try to see that our workers are equal stakeholders. And if you get to any company, you find out that if the directors are using Mercedes, the staffs too are using brand new cars. The disparity within private organization is unlike what happens in government, where you have government senior officials using quite a number of cars as and the others are not able to use it. But what the private sector wants is for the workers to be able to even buy the goods we are producing. If we are producing soap, they should have enough money to eat, to buy the basic things in life, and even to wash their body well and buy toothpaste and things that we produce here in Nigeria.
Let me start from you, Mr. Oyeshola, before you react on any of those issues which you are free and you should take. Now, the last message is talking about the disparity, same grade level, but obviously different job description. As somebody in the private sector, which one do you think we should value more? Yes, there should be a national policy on minimum wage, but is it the value of the work done? I hope you understand what I'm saying. Or emphasis should be on the certificate and the so-called grading of people. Like it's just talk again, it's talked about the example. We have some people who mandatorily, because of their work, the stipulated time policy is 8 hours minimum, 40 hours a week. But definitely for some job description, you cannot stick to that. You must work sometimes 80 hours because you cannot abandon the job. You have to. So that's the nature of it. So which one? How do we factor all this?
Actually, I'm of the opinion that in the industry, there are different sectors, and salary structure in the industry and in private sector, we don't really compare it. You only compare it when it's related to your own industry, because the job description, like you rightly said, the productivity, everything taken into consideration will determine what people should be paid, and uh, like and the value placed on what you are doing. For example, in my own industry, those who are writing software earn much more than those who go under the table to connect the systems together and think. Whereas they are more visible, and people will think they should connect more people, but because people don't know what those who are writing software are doing, because they are the real ones making the.
Okay, David, quickly, so that this will form the basis for your response. I don't want to tell this story. You have about 5 minutes or less to do this. Now, I have a friend, a female friend, neurosurgeon in the United States. She worked for about 18 years as a neurosurgeon, and suddenly one day we were talking, and she said, "Guess what? I've changed job." I thought she meant she has left one hospital to another. I said she's on the road, driving the truck. So she's now what they call trucking staff. And she was so excited. A medical doctor, 18 years work experience, switching over to become a truck driver. In Nigerian context, that is what we call job satisfaction, really. How does this relate to all these issues we are talking about?
You painted a scenario of someone abandoning some kind of a job
That we
which
would
is
have referred to as glamour
yes,
and all
glamorous
these
and high
emoluments.
estimation. But the reality is that in the economy which you mentioned, trucking, it's one key area in commerce where distribution of produced goods become very, very crucial. American economy, for instance, it is not about what we want to produce. It is not about how to produce it. It's about how do we market, how do we get our goods across to consumers. And America being a very large nation at that, transportation becomes a crucial factor to be considered by manufacturers and producers. So if you look at it very critically, people who are willing to put their lives on the road, people who are willing to do the job 24 hours driving the truck across the country as large as America will be well remunerated compared to an economy, some kind of economy like Nigeria, which is consuming. We don't produce here, so we don't give ourselves a headache about distribution. So whoever that helps to distribute the little we produce or the little we export to end users would earn relatively compared to someone who happens to be a neurosurgeon in Nigeria. You cannot compare that.
All right,
it's about
simply in just one
across.
word. This is the final one for the two of you. First, Mr. Oyeshola, with what the story I've told, with what you have said, do you think this continuous comparison of salaries and emolument, politician, medical, nurses, and other people, do you think it's right for business?
As far as I'm concerned, the salary of politicians is the responsibility of all of us. And I take it that all of us, civil servants, public servants, those of us in the private sector, should challenge politicians as to how much they earn. Unfortunately,
how much they earn or how much they should earn?
How much they should earn compared to other sectors of the economy.
All right, Mr. Adebiyi.
Yes, sir.
The same, because I just want your response. Do you think it's right?
My co-discussant is absolutely right. It's absolutely right. Just yesterday, there was this disturbing news that came on air that political appointees, DGs, permanent secretaries would now continue to earn pension as to the equal amount of salaries they were earning before quitting the job.
While in service.
While in service. This is outrageous. How many of those workers out there could earn as much as they are earning while at work?
I'm sorry, we must end it here. We have a couple of adverts to play after this. We appreciate you, the gentleman here, Ogun Adebiyi, Comrade, is of the GNC, the Joint Negotiating Council in Ogun State, and of course, Mr. Oyeshola is the Vice President of ABEOCCIMA, Abeokuta Chamber of Commerce, Industry, Mines, and Agriculture. I am Dele Ayodo. I say God bless you all. God bless Nigeria and God bless Rock City.